everyone, my name is Evan and I like to make stop-motion dinosaurs and monsters. And on part 2 today of the King Kong project, I say, we'll be adding the first layer of clay along with some details along the way, I do say. On this part of the King of the Hollow Earth project today, monkey business continues, I say. We'll be sculpting, you could say, with some plasticine clay and painting today with some added details along the way. And as I craft away at King Kong today, we'll be sailing away to Skull Island, I do say. Because I recently just watched the 3-hour edition of King Kong Skull Island, so what better time to go over this movie, at least in my opinion. We'll start with one of the bigger questions. What happened to the lost civilization on Skull Island? Where are the people that once thrived there? Could they have been wiped out by disease, corruption, or war? So what was it exactly that caused nature to reclaim the land and seemingly wipe off all traces of mankind off the island? And how does Kong fit into all of it? We'll discuss all of that here. So let's get to it. Skull Island is a host to a variety of dangerous creatures, such as the Festatosaurus rex, Photodons, Pteranodon, and much more. Obviously, the land is too dangerous for people to explore the island without ending up on some creature's menu. But I think it's pretty obvious that there once was a grand civilization there that thrived in harmony on the island. People that constructed great buildings had social order and were balanced with the monsters on the island. To find out more about these people, we have to go way back in time to the very creation of Skull Island itself. Skull Island was once part of a greater landmass, ancient Gondwanaland. This is the name given to the southern half of the Pangea supercontinent that existed approximately 300 million years ago, consisting of the major continental blocks of South America, Africa, Arabia, Madagascar, Antarctica, Australia, and more. Skull Island sat near the turbulent boundary of the Indo-Australian and Eurasian tectonic plates. Major earthquakes and volcanic activity caused this land to fracture, leading to the creation of the island we now know. The volcanic activity even paved its way to the lush forest environment, because once the lava flows subside, it creates new land with rich soil. 3,000 years ago, ancient Melanesian colonists traveled to Skull Island to thrive on its rich jungle soil and shores plentiful with schools of fish, which allowed them to plant food, craft structures out of wood, and stay fed and happy. Over the course of hundreds of years, they became a highly advanced civilization, carving entire cities out of stone and forming complex social structures, similar to what we see in our civilization today. They even created medicines out of the prehistoric plant life that grew plentiful on the island, which has now been lost to time and will never be recovered. They use these to treat the even most complex of diseases that we cannot cure today. The mighty giant wall that we witness in King Kong once circled the entire island, acting as a border to keep invaders that carried potential new diseases from getting in, but also anything from getting out. This wall would have been a living and breathing city, with thousands of people living in peace, becoming a haven for people who wanted to live by their own laws, isolated from the rest of the world. It's very likely that the natives brought established cultures and traditions, as well as social beliefs and religion to Skull Island, which is evident in the great carved statues as well as other magnificent artifacts. So we know that this civilization was able to thrive and grow as a people. However, there's one big problem that stands out. Skull Island is filled to the brim with giant monsters. prehistoric beasts and relics from another era, left to evolve in seclusion over the course of millions of years. So, how were they able to survive? From what I've been able to gather, there's a variety of factors that allowed them to do this. One thing being is that their culture was much more based around embracing nature as opposed to destroying it. For example, they carved their structures out of the rocks that were plentiful on the island, without damaging the surrounding wildlife. They were also very careful about how they went exploring the island, and had strict rules in place to not to disturb the potentially dangerous organisms. And another theory is that the colonists brought the giant ape species known as Kong to Skull Island, and they coexisted together, with their devoted culture being based around worshipping these giant apes that protected them. Symbiotic relationships aren't actually that uncommon in nature. It's actually quite common, and it especially wouldn't be too unusual between two species of great ape as long as they benefit each other. And as seen in King Kong, sacrifice could have been a large part of that, offering up gifts of human sacrifices to their appointed gods, not only to appease them, but to trade off for protection by building a unique symbiosis with this all-powerful species. And with this, they were able to overcome all obstacles on the island. And with this unique bond, they were able to grow to a population of thousands. So, what happened to this civilization? Why do we only see remnants of their once grand culture? How did they seemingly disappear? Around 1,000 years ago, for the most part, they were wiped out, as they highly underestimated the viability of the Kong species, being able to protect them on the island from the giant carnivorous beasts. For thousands of years, they protected the natives. And in Southeast Asia, where they previously came from, Kong species were king. They were the top of the food chain and faced no competitors. But Skull Island was very different. There were monsters that met and even outmatched Kong's species. And one by one, as each member of Kong's species were killed in battle, the native society became weaker and weaker, and the support began to decline. The regions that were deemed safe on Skull Island were no longer viable, and the natives began to retreat back to the shores and outskirts of the wall. Food and medicine became scarce, and their population declined significantly. Their ordered society crumbled, and in the course of hundreds of years, they turned to savagery and became almost entirely disconnected from their ancestors, a hollow shell of their once great, rich culture. Unfortunately, we've seen similar events with the Aztecs, a civilization that flourished in central Mexico. Once a thriving people, they would, like on the natives of Skull Island, also offer sacrifices to please their gods, like the hummingbird of the south, the principal Aztec god known as the patron of war and sun. A once thriving and advanced culture, they were wiped out by disease brought by European colonization hundreds of years ago, and amongst other things, but we won't go there. The only thing left standing is the remains of their once bustling city. But unlike the Aztecs who spread out and adapted to changing environments, the natives of Skull Island could not. The island only became smaller and smaller, as the crashing seas only chipped away at the rock, and the predators became more prominent on the land, as they were forced to reside closer and closer to each other. Without proper order to society, the fishing boats fell into disrepair, and famine spread like the plague. They turned to cannibalism, which already weakened their dwindling numbers, which have now fallen to a mere few hundred. In the past, the natives carved stone skulls in a way to appease their gods, Kong species. The sight of skulls reminded them of the sacrificial rituals, and was a way to tame them into recognizing patterns. But towards the end of the reign of man on Skull Island, skulls began to represent something far more sinister: death to anyone that came near. Skulls can be a sign of celebration, especially in Mexican culture, and for the longest time, Skull Island would have been the same. But as the end of their civilization drew closer, the skulls changed from a sign from a celebration for their gods to becoming a warning. Around the time Denham's team showed up on the island, the natives were already on their last legs. Pun not intended. Anyway, at this point in time, they were almost completely abandoned of any social construct, outside their sacrificial ceremony for their last remaining god, King Kong. And in 1948, Skull Island actually sunk to the ocean below, following a devastating earthquake that reached 9.2 on the Richter scale, destroying any trace of the prehistoric monsters, the bones of Kong's species, and the ancient civilization. Perhaps the island sinking was for the better. After all, the secrets and the horrifying monsters would have only done more harm than good. But future research teams will be able to go back and inspect the underwater remains of this once great ancient civilization, which has now become very similar to, well, Atlantis. It most certainly would have been amazing to see this civilization at its prime, being one of the leading senses of culture, medicine, and quality of life. But the real question is, would you have liked to have seen them? Let me know in the comments below. I personally would have loved to see their giant stone structures before Mother Nature took the land. But that's all the time we have for Skull Island. So if there's anything you would like to expand upon, let me know in the comments, because I would definitely be open for a discussion on this movie, because it was great. So I should probably give it a rating or a Doug rating. I would definitely give it a 9.5. It was really enjoyable. And if you enjoyed this video and perhaps learned something new, be sure to hit that like button because it helps this video reach a wider audience. And if you want to see more Kong, well, part 3 should be coming out next week, along with daily short updates. So if you're new here and, well, made it this far, be sure to hit that subscribe button and check out some of the other videos because there's plenty more content for you to check out involving Godzilla and dinosaurs. And while you're at it, you may as well stomp on that notification bell, I say, because that way you can stay up to date a lot easier, I do say. And I'm gonna do a quick mention on the next stop-motion animation project. The Zombie Godzilla Dinosaur War will be continuing soon, as briefly mentioned in the intro as well, which will start shortly after the release of the restoration of Ignis the Fire-Farting Dragon. Anyway, it's time for the build rundown. So on part 2 of King Kong today, we only really used one material, you could say, apart from painting, I do say. What we used predominantly today was Plasticine clay. Approximately 4 or 5 pounds of it, you could say, to make this giant kaiju gorilla so far, I say. But there's plenty of more work coming this monkey's way. For one, yes, I know we need eyes, but there's still a lot of details that we basically have to touch over. Mainly muscles, like we have to add some abdominal ones. Shoulders could use a little bit more detail as well. Fingernails, as well as probably some hand details. I might be adding a bit more support there because during the glamour shots here, unfortunately, his hands did not fare too well to this knuckle position. And yes, while we're back here, we'll probably be working on Kong's rear a little bit. Mainly adding a lot of that silver backing as well as some extra muscle tone. Now the silver backing is probably going to be one of the last steps, mainly because that's going to be a brighter color and Kong is, well, predominantly black, so we don't want those colors to basically stain over. Then we have some finishing face details. Basically there's a lot of wrinkles and probably a lot more layers of plasticine clay to add there, as well as ears, which is a big thing other people have missed, and I'm surprised no one's commented that on the shorts yet, but I probably shouldn't mention that. And a few of you have noticed that he has a silver tooth. Now, for those who might be unaware, that basically implies that this is going to be the Godzilla x Kong version. So yes, we will be making a gauntlet in part 3, as well as a battle axe. And as always, if you have a suggestion for a future project, let me know in the comments below. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if anything. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.